back here with us on Urban Debate on Mirror Now. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi visited India. In fact, he met with India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar and NSA Ajit Doval in Delhi. India's border dispute with China and troop deployment in Ladakh were the key issues that were discussed in the 3-hour-long meeting between both the leaders. Jaishankar said that friction arising out of China's troop deployment and the ensuing skirmishes like in Galwan could not be a basis of a normal bilateral relationship. The two sides also discussed international crisis that we are seeing currently in Ukraine and Afghanistan. Listen in.
We have a situation where peace and tranquility in the border areas has been disturbed. So the situation there is not normal. The situation there is not normal. If peace and tranquility is the foundation of the basis of how we are going forward, then obviously that is also disturbed. So the answer in that sense is, if you ask me, is our relationship normal today? My answer to you is no, it is not. And it cannot be normal if the situation in the border areas is abnormal. And surely the presence of a large number of troops there in contravention of agreements is abnormality.
Let me now go across to Sushant Sareen, Senior Fellow ORF, joining us on the broadcast this evening to help us understand what this visit really means for India. Mr. Sareen, appreciate you joining us here on Urban Debate on Mirror Now this evening. 2 years into military standoff along the LAC in Ladakh, China's foreign minister visits India. How do you see this? And then we'll talk about the comment that Mr. Jaishankar made just now.
Look, frankly, I don't think anything really came out of this. This was diplomacy, of the normal sorts. You're keeping the lines of communication open. You are engaging with each other. But we are really not resolving any of the issues between India and China. I think, the reason for Wang Yi's arrival in New Delhi was basically to ensure that India can come for the BRICS summit, and some of the other events which are likely to take place in China. But other than that, also perhaps gauge the mood in New Delhi on relations with China. But nothing really has come out of it, because if you look at what Mr. Jaishankar said, or reports which are coming out of the NSA's office, it is very clear that there is a complete disconnect between what India has said today and what the Chinese are saying, because the Chinese are saying we shouldn't let the border issues, affect the larger or the long-term relationship, which is utter nonsense, what the Chinese are spouting. But this is the kind of nonsense the Chinese always do. And from the Indian side, I think it's a much more realistic approach that, look, you cannot have normal relations if you have abnormal situations around the border. And the Chinese have militarized the border, especially in eastern Ladakh, to a point which is not acceptable to India. So clearly that disconnect is there. And if you look at what Mr. Jaishankar said, it is also very clear that all those old outstanding issues, for example, on trade, we are still reiterating points which we have been making for the last 20 years with virtually no progress on market access and other stuff. So I don't see, this relationship really going anywhere. I think it's caught up in a kind of a stasis of sorts, and it's only going to go downhill from here. I don't see it improve anytime soon.
Interesting. You say this relation isn't going anywhere. The External Affairs Minister made it very clear that this relation is not normal. He also had told the Chinese Foreign Minister that bilateral ties can't be normal if situation at the border is abnormal. What do you make of the kind of statements that are coming from India this side at a time when Chinese foreign minister is here in India? Because India's response so far with respect to China has been more courteous and more polite in the past. But now, do you think the kind of tone that we are seeing could really help us get what we want at the border, the friction that's still there, the standoff that is still continuing?
I think our attitude in the past has been pusillanimous. And the attitude now is a far more we are far more candid and far more clear on what is expected of the Chinese if they really want to see this relationship move forward. And I think it's about time that we get real as far as China is concerned. It's not a friendly country. It's a hostile country, perhaps even an enemy country. It's a country which has shafted us at every chance it has got. Even today, Hena, look at it that the Chinese have opened their borders to students from other countries, but are not allowing Indian students to go back and finish their education. Now, you have to be really bloody minded if you are taking this out on Indian students. And there is no explanation given why Pakistanis are allowed, but Indian students are not allowed to go back and finish their studies. So, I keep asking this question. Please name one thing, one good deed that the Chinese have done as far as India is concerned. And the problem is that until now we have been beguiled by the Chinese, with all kinds of nonsensical formulations which the Chinese can come up with, which actually mean nothing, but everybody attributes, some great genius to the Chinese. They come up with really, it's basically they don't know English language, so they come up with these silly formulations which they come up with. But the fact of the matter remains that we've kind of got beguiled in it by it, and we've got taken up by that. And I think that stuff has stopped. So what is happening is that they will occupy us on some small issue like hot springs, but they will not talk about the militarization of the border or attempts by the Chinese to change the status quo along the LAC. They will not talk about India's insistence that we need to start at least delineating the LAC, something which Mr. Modi has been pushing for ever since he became Prime Minister in 2014. So I think the patience with the Chinese is running low, correctly so. And I think it's about time that we start working very hard to start decoupling ourselves from the Chinese economy, because that's one lever which they control over us. Other than that, we don't need them. The second thing, Henna, and I think this is important, Wang Yi today says that, look, we'll settle the border number one in the long term, which is utter nonsense, because you can't keep encroaching or trying to encroach on the border and then say that we will address it in the long term. But more importantly, when he formulates this nonsense of China, India plus in South Asia, this is a kind of a backdoor to, to both stop India's objections to projects which the Chinese are sponsoring in countries in the region which are bankrupting them. Sri Lanka is an example. Pakistan, of course, was always bankrupt, but Nepal will go the bankruptcy way if they go ahead with the Chinese projects. Number one. Right. Number two, they are trying to use these projects to enter into India from the back door. Clearly not an acceptable proposition for us.
Interesting. And as some people had called it Jhula diplomacy a few years ago, do you think that frame of mind is now getting over and we are now getting more real with China, as you called it?
I think we were pretty real even then. I think it was just the style of diplomacy that Mr. Modi was trying to, reach out to these guys, trying to be nice to them. But even at the time they were on the Jhula, the fact of the matter remains that the Chinese were trying to encroach in eastern Ladakh. And at that point of time, I think some pretty candid conversations went on between the two sides. And finally, the Chinese withdrew. The Chinese right now want us to go ahead and have another round of that informal talks. But I don't think India is biting that bait just yet. Unless there is something substantive that the Chinese do to address Indian concerns, I don't see any reason why, we have to continue with these diplomatic niceties of going for BRICS and stuff like that. I think it's about time, we put the Chinese in their place.
All right, Mr. Sushant Serene, appreciate you joining us here on Urban Debate on Mirror Now and helping our viewers understand the importance of this visit of China's foreign minister in India.